Greetings from Redefined Church. I'm Joel Van Briggle, and I'm delighted you've chosen to be with us today. Redefined Church is a gathering of people from many different nations and various backgrounds who are exploring faith at the intersection of life, community, and mission. Our desire is that you sense that you belong. Whether you have been attending church for many years or you've never come to church before, we want you to know that you belong. If you'd like to speak with someone about furthering your journey and perhaps needing prayer, we want to connect with you. So drop us a message and we would love to connect with you to help you take next steps. You are also always welcome at our in-person gatherings at our Overijse campus and our Tervuren campus. Check our social media and website for all the details. We look forward to connecting with you. And now, today's message.
So these past few weeks, we've been talking about followers, namely how to be a follower. So we focused on the food, the folly, and the fuel of followers. This week, we're going to be talking about the freedom of followers. Now, to start off, I want us all to think about toddlers. Personally, I can't think of anyone more free than a toddler. And I want to start off as well by saying that I don't have kids, but I've spent a lot of time with kids, namely my sister-in-law's kids, my nieces. She has two of them, and today I'd like to talk a little bit about Sage. Sage is about 2 years old. She is wonderful, she is sweet, has a big heart, but is fiery and knows what she wants when she wants it. So let's go back. So we were in the States, we were visiting for my sister-in-law to graduate, and somewhere along the way, we ended up at a restaurant and everyone was inside and it was me. I was on my own. I was watching my nieces and Sage tried to take a drink out of my wife's drink. Sage had her own drink, so I took the drink away from Sage, and her being who she was, she stopped, and she's a rather passionate little child, so she stopped and she made this exact face at me. And then she noticed that it wasn't really working, so she made it more. And then she cried out at me and she made this motion kind of like this. You know how toddlers like they use their whole arm? She went like that, like she was throwing something, because usually she would find something to throw, but we were kind of in front of a restaurant, so she had nothing to throw. And then when she noticed that didn't work, she laid down flat on her back on the concrete in front of this restaurant and just stared at the ceiling and just thought about things for a moment before getting up and just running off to do her thing, eat dirt or whatever she was going to do next. And I loved watching this process because I got to watch how she really just processed that whole interaction that we had. As she lay there and, just kind of thought things over, I kind of felt for her a bit. I mean, here she was with her newfound freedom. I mean, it wasn't that long until she was a baby. She couldn't communicate. She couldn't really do anything for herself. And here she was now. She could run around, she could grab things, she could say a few words, she could communicate a bit. People were giving her things when she wanted it, but at the same time, she was being told, no, or being guided in certain ways. Like we'd let her do some things, we wouldn't let her do other things. And, she just found that frustrating at times. And, she did a good job. She worked her way through it, but it was annoying. I think sometimes we get a little annoyed by toddlers and we don't think about how annoying life must be for them. And watching her do that and thinking about it before, I came to speak today, I started to think about that must be a little bit about how God watches us, He watches us kind of run into walls as we're trying to figure things out and then just kind of lie down and have to just be annoyed for a second. And He's like, trust me, there's a good plan with this freedom that you have, with this stuff that I've given you. I know you're figuring it out. So as we're thinking about that, I want to talk about our first point, which is free to follow. So Sage was, as a toddler, was stuck having to be a follower of the rest of us. She couldn't lead herself yet. And in the same way, we're not stuck, but we choose, and God chooses to allow us to be his followers. So let's look at Galatians. We're going to look at Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. It is for freedom that Christ has set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. So, today we're going to be looking at the book of Galatians, which was written by the Apostle Paul as a letter to one of the churches that he founded in Galatia, an area of what is today Turkey. It's important that we take a second to look back at the context behind this chapter, because it's really going to help us understand what Paul is talking about when he talks about freedom in this book, because this book really is all about freedom. So, to do that though, we're going to have to take a minute and talk a little bit about some early church drama. So there's drama in the modern church, there's drama in pretty much any place that you put people in, and there was drama in the early church. But this was kind of different drama than the usual church drama because the church hadn't been around very long. This was in that stage in between where the church was going from being a church of mostly Jews to being a church of mostly Gentiles, where they were figuring out what they were doing with their Jewishness of the religion and where they were going in the future with the Gentiles. And basically what happened is Paul arrived here in Galatia and he gave the gospel, he founded a church, and then he left to continue with his missionary journey. After he left, there were other people that came in and began teaching something different than what he had originally taught, began to kind of change the gospel in a different way. Namely, what they were doing is that they were teaching that for these Gentiles to truly become Christians, they had to first adopt what we would call the Old Testament law, the Mosaic law, which is the law that they would have followed in the Old Testament, that the Jews used to follow. Now, Paul had taught that Jesus was the fulfillment of this law. Jesus fulfilled this law. It wasn't necessary for Gentiles to live under this law. But after he had left, another group had come in and started teaching this, and the Galatian church was really, really confused. They were in a bit of a theological crisis. They were trying to figure out which of these two gospels they were going to follow. And in this letter, Paul is trying to convince the Galatians that they're being led astray, that Jesus has provided freedom from the thing that this other group is telling them they have to become a part of. See, Paul understood that the Galatians were being pressured to follow the world. And when I say the world, I mean society, the outer systems, the systems that the world already had. Because the gospel that Jesus provided was very different from what was already in place. What was already in place with the Jewish law and all of the extra laws that they had added on top of that. Paul sees that people are trying to pull them back into this system, back into the systems that they've been freed from. And he's trying to tell them, no. Let's stop for a moment. Let's go back to the original message that you were given. And just like it was for the Galatians 1,000 years ago, it's the same today. We all have to choose to follow something. It's impossible to go through our life without following some sort of idea or institution, football team, professional chef, you name it. But it's only through following Jesus that we're able to be truly freed from those things. When we follow Jesus, we are freed from the pressures and the burdens that the world provides, in the same way that the Galatians had already been freed from those pressures, and that Paul was trying to call them back to. We have been freed to follow. Now, let's look a little bit more about what it means to follow, break that down a little bit. Because another thing, and this is our second point, is that God has called us to be free to be ourselves. So let's look a little bit more about what that freedom looks like, what it really means. Because the freedom that God provides isn't like the freedom that the world provides, that we think of usually. See, there are still boundaries put in place by God when we follow him, when we follow him in our freedom. This is a big contrast to what society tells us what freedom is, which is usually no boundaries, do what you want, figure out what you want to do when you want to do it. But God isn't like the rest of the world. And his boundaries don't work like the rest of the world's do. See, God knows how he created us and what is good and bad for us. His boundaries are to help us thrive as we were created. Now, this isn't to say that he created us all to be the same person. I think sometimes when we think about boundaries, we think about like a mold. We think about something that fits around everybody and makes everybody come out in a certain exact way. But in the same way I said before, God created all of us. He also created all of us differently. So I want to look at a psalm really quick, Psalm 139. I wish I could read the whole psalm, but we're just going to talk about this one section. It's verses 13 and 14. For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. See, God made us all unique and wants nothing more than for us to thrive exactly who he has made us to be. He made the boundaries so we could thrive, but he also provided this amazing space within those boundaries for us to fill and create and find our own way to do the things that God has uniquely called us to do. Because one of the things that God has given us is creativity. Now, I know when I say creativity, some of you are going to check out right away, because sometimes we like to say that there is a creative and a non-creative person. I want to go ahead and quickly say that I think everyone is creative. I think the problem is that usually when we talk about creativity, we only talk about the arts. I mean, I can talk about myself. So I play a bunch of instruments, I draw, I act, I am what you might call an extremely creative person. But if you ask me to create a spreadsheet or to analytically look at a set of things and create a plan, I am the last person you want to ask because I'm not creative in that way. So I'm creative in the ways that are stereotypically creative, but there are so many different ways that you are creative in ways that I am not. In ways that other people who would think that they were never creative are creative in ways that I will never be. So, and I think that's awesome because what that means is everyone's canvas is the same. All the boundaries are the same, but what we do within that canvas, the things that we create within that canvas are different and varied and all fit into the unique plan that God has for each one of us. And now let's go to our last point, which is free to serve. So I'm talking a little bit about our unique creativity, and sometimes we like to call those gifts that God has given us. And I want to talk about what we do with those gifts as we kind of round out what we're talking about today. After we're full-fledged followers of Jesus, what should we do with the freedom that he's given us, with the gifts that he's given us? And when I was thinking about this and when I was going over this in my head, a little song from Sunday school popped into my head. Sunday school is like a little class that you used to do for kids before church started. I know some of you didn't go to Sunday school and some of you may not have heard this song before, but I don't even remember the whole song. But what I do remember is this little bit. It's like you hold up your thumb and you sing, "This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine." And that's most of it, really. But I love this song because it always reminded me as a kid that this light that Jesus has given me isn't for myself. It's not meant to be hidden away, put under a box, snuffed out. It's meant to be shared, and it's meant to shine for others. I'm meant to use my gifts to shine God's light for other people. And if we look back at Galatians 5, so we look at Galatians 5 verses 13 to 14, we see a great example of this. It's, "You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself." So, as a follower of Jesus, as a follower who's living in the freedom of Jesus, serving others is our greatest command and the greatest thing that will bring us joy and that we should be looking to do. Because if we go back to the idea of art and that we're all these canvases that are doing beautiful things, when you create art, you can create art for yourself. You can create amazing things with your gifts and hide them away, but you'll never gain as much joy as you do whenever you show them to someone, as whenever you share your gifts, as whenever you bring them out and allow others to see what you've made, what God has done in you, and what He could do with them. So as we go from here and as we go through the rest of the week, I want us to all think about the amazing things that God has given us, the amazing gifts He's given us as followers, the freedom that He's given us. And I want us to think a little bit about the lack of freedom that maybe some others around us may have. Because God has provided this for us, but He hasn't provided this for us to live under a rock or to live with it hidden away. He's called us to shine in that freedom, to show others that freedom, to help them see the things that He's done in us, and to help them, create their own canvas and decorate it themselves. So, like I said before, God has called us to be followers, but He has also called us to make followers. Part of shining that light, part of showing the world our gifts, is to draw people in to be followers of Jesus as well. True followers aren't just content to follow alone. They want to bring other people in. They want to guide other people to be followers as well, and really to be leaders of other followers while they follow themselves. So I want to call each of us to be proactive when it comes to shining the light, to look to others, to try to draw them in and to draw them into the light that we've been given, and to try to show them that the following that we do is the greatest following you can do of anything, anywhere. All right. Thank you, God. Thank you for bringing us here together today. Thank you for the people watching. I just want to pray that as we go onward, as we go into the rest of the week, month, year, or whatever time someone's watching this, I just want to pray that you will encourage them in their freedom. You'll encourage them in the freedom they've had, the freedom that Jesus has given them, and the freedom that they have the ability to give to someone else. God, may we not live apart from the wonderful commission that you've given us, the wonderful guidance that you've given us to spread your word and to show others the light that you've given us. Thank you so much. Amen.
Thank you so much for joining us here at Redefined Church. If you have any questions or want prayer, we encourage you to send us a private message. We would be happy to connect with you and to pray with you to help you in your faith journey. Make sure this week to get a hold of the Redefining Moments. You can find those on our website and on our Facebook page. It's a daily prayer and Bible reading guide designed to help you grow and in your walk with Jesus Christ. Make sure that you check out our website so that you can see everything that's happening and to be part of that here at Redefined Church. May God bless you, and we hope that you have an incredible week.